This is a discussion about an interview that I saw on YouTube. It's David Precht interviews Robert Menasse. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. He's a writer out of Austria. David Precht is a journalist out of Germany. And they talk about the EU and Europe as a concept and the dangers of a collapsing European sentiment. The reason I want to talk about this is for several points. I mean, one is I grew up in Europe, so Europe's dear to my heart, and I think the continent's on definitely on the wrong path, and I'm concerned about extremism, totalitarianism, and things along those lines growing up. But what I find really interesting here is a clear depiction of what the problem is in Europe, and it actually relates to the United States and to Trump. And I think it's important to understand what it is that a society requires from its government in order to have a functioning society. And this is where I draw the line between, let's say, a hobby and profession. You know, we're professional investors. It's our job to make money. It's our job to invest, profitably into future projects as investors. And to some extent, understanding countries and understanding what it takes for them to succeed is part of that job. In particular now in the United States, I think the macro, as they say in the business, is as important as understanding a business. And the reason the macro is important is because the macro has been going wrong. The U.S. as a country has been on a bad path, and now it's being corrected. And I think this interview between David Precht and Robert Menasse sort of shows what's going on with Europe. And it shows a couple of things. It shows, well, what's going on with Europe, but also by understanding what's wrong with Europe, I think we learn what it takes for, let's say, a construct like Europe to actually function, or a construct like the United States or China or any kind of larger agglomeration of either countries or regions requires certain things. And what it requires is really three things. One is the purse, one is the sword, and one is the vote. I want to discuss this, of course, in more detail, but what I mean by that is that you need to have the money and the sword clearly defined. Who has the power and who has the money? And then the vote has to be the constraint. So if you do a good job as a politician, you get the vote. If you don't do a good job, you get replaced by another politician. This is what it takes for a functioning society to do well. Europe is not clear about these things, and that's why it's not going well. In particular, the purse is not clear because there's no common purse. There is a common credit, so people can borrow money in the name of the euro or in the name of the EU, but then they spend it on their own, whatever national or regional needs they have. And in my opinion, this is why Europe's falling apart. Also, there's no sword. Europe doesn't have a common sword. In other words, there's no clear definition of the border and the protection of the border. There's no clear definition of what it means to protect Europeans from non-Europeans. And if you don't have that, you don't have a country. And of course, this is reminiscent of the United States and us not having a border on the south and having illegal immigration. It's not so much about the illegal immigrants per se. I mean, of course, they are also a problem if there's too many of them. But it's also when you don't have a border, when you don't protect your border, when you don't define clearly what it means to be an American, and when the definition between being an American and a non-American is fluid, well, then you don't have a country. And then people lose their faith in your country, they lose their faith in your government, and then bad things happen. So this, in general, is the way I want to discuss this. It's the necessity. If anybody wants to live together, they better define clearly who spends the money, how the money is allocated. They define who provides safety, and they provide a very clear way of who gets elected in order to provide these services. This is not even on podcast. It's December 2nd, 2024. This is Crypto. This is the last update. We're up about 6%. The market is up 1%. For the year, we're up roughly 68%. The market's up 25%. We're up by 43%. So this interview between David Precht and Robert Menasse is worthwhile. It's in German. Unfortunately, I'm not sure it has captions on YouTube, but maybe there's a way to get the translation on one of the AI services. Certainly there is a technology available right now. Maybe you have to pay for it, but it's worth listening to because I think it's a neutral um, approach towards the concept of Europe. Yeah, I mean, David Precht is, in my opinion, is a sort of a left-wing environmentalist, but he's professional enough to keep that sort of not to keep that away from his questioning. There's sometimes sort of an inductive bias where he would say things like, "Well, we need to really take care of the most important problem, which is the climate problem," which I disagree with. I don't think that's the most important problem because the climate problem is just not very well defined, and therefore it's not even a problem. If you want to define it, then you have to be more precise in what it means to solve it, and so on. So back to Europe. What's the problem in Europe? So Europe is a conglomeration of national states that are combined into what's called the European Union. And for the last 20 years, it has been going sideways. People are disillusioned with the EU. People don't like the EU. There's a lot of nationalist movements in every country. We have Brexit, of course, with the UK even leaving the EU. So there's a lot of animosity towards the EU. And the question is, why is that happening? And I think the answer why that's happening is that Robert Menasse offers a really nice explanation where he's saying, look, the problem with the EU is that you have a common credit based on the euro and the EU, but national spending. So that's not clear. And when that's not clear, waste happens. And when that's not clear, people always blame the other for wasting too much or not following the rule and so on and so forth. So that's one problem. The other problem is the third, and us doesn't talk about this necessarily, but in my opinion, that's part of the definition of a society that is combined under the umbrella of either a supranation or a nation. It has to defend its borders, and it has to be clear of what it means to be a citizen and what it means to be part of a protective shield and what it does, and whatnot. So I am not being protected by the United States of America or our military when I'm somewhere else because I'm not an American citizen, and that's very clear. And that should be it should be like that with Europeans, and it's not because there's no common CERN. It's not even clear how to protect countries like Ukraine from aggression from Russia. Things are not clear, so that's why Europe needs America to help them solve this. And I think the solution to the Trump isolation, which is hopefully coming, we here in America, we expect Trump to isolate the U.S. from the problems in Europe. The answer to that is to have a common source, which means that European countries have to give up some of their sovereign power of, let's say, having their own military and give it up to a higher power, which is ruled by a EU government and also elected by elected officials from the EU government. So yeah, I guess in other words, if you want to have a stronger EU, you need to give up certain privileges that nation states have right now and really combine with the EU if you want to have a stronger EU. If not, then it's better to have a regional conglomerate like Europe has always been, based on nation states. Now, I don't have a clear view of what really is the right solution, but I want to mention a third thing which is very important, which is being discussed here in the US a lot, which is the unaccounted power grab by unelected officials. And that's the same problem in the EU as we have here. And that's, I think, the main problem why people are sick and tired of the government. And that is that unelected officials just create laws which are not defined by any kind of parliament or Congress. They just create laws or rules which then turn into laws, whether it's regulations about, car seats around Europe, or regulations about who is allowed to vote, or regulations about real estate taxes, or any kind of, or crypto, or that kind of thing. I think you want to have a common law, you want to have a parliament that decides about those laws, and you want to have a government that executes under the umbrella of that judicial system. So all of those things are very important. If you have an army of unelected officials, which is even worse in the EU than it is in the United States, so unelected bureaucrats that single-handedly take the power into their own hand, and execute against strategies such as, for example, protecting a certain interest group by issuing the regulations, protecting maybe a country, protecting a region. Those things should not be possible. So to summarize, this interview has given me food for thought. I think it's worth listening to the interview because it does really two things. One is it defines what a nation actually is. A nation is defined by its purse, defined by its sword, and controlled by the vote. And if that's not clear, if there's any kind of open discussion of what exactly is the purse, or where's the sword, or how's the vote happen, the nations tend to fail. It's just how it is, and that's not. Maybe there's a law or something like that of nature or law of nations, but this is just a natural, organic development. If you don't have if you don't have a clear understanding of where the money is raised and how it's being spent, if you don't have a clear understanding of who decides, if you don't have a clear understanding of what protection means, and if you don't have a clear understanding of what a vote means and who gets to execute power based on votes and how the votes are allocated, then a country tends to fall apart. So we are in the process of fixing this here in the United States, particularly with Doge. And I think Europe is well advised to also fix that. If they can't give up the national sovereignty and want to stick on to their national powers, then they should also revert to the national state. Now, Robert Menasse says that is unfortunate. That is not a good thing. I agree with that. Nationalism in isolated is a bad thing. But like every policy, I think policies come as packages. So if you want to have more national power, then you could maybe define that national power not as based on a passport or a race, but maybe you should define it by abiding to a certain, value system. Last thing I want to say, I want to paraphrase Mark Andreessen, which I think he has a very good way to think about this when it comes to America. He says there's America and there's the United States. The United States is bad, the America is good. What does it mean by that? It means that the United States is the bureaucracy and the government and the wasteful Congress and all of these things. And that's bad, that needs to be reformed. America is the spirit and the value system on which this country is built. The spirit of accountability, of entrepreneurship, of you eat what you catch, of giving people opportunities, giving people second chances. All of these things are good things. They should be nurtured. They should be, proliferated throughout at least the United States, if not the world. But the United States government, so meaning the actual bureaucracy and the powers, they are bad. And they went way out of control, particularly under the Biden administration. That needs to be reversed. And that's what we're working on right now. That's a good thing. Thank you.